joined by my colleagues, content creator and writer for The Cradle, Karim Shami, and columnist and editor for The Cradle, Sharmin Narwani. And as usual, before we begin today's discussion, just to remind you, leave a like as soon as you arrive. Just hit that like button so that this video can go out to as many people as possible. Make sure to subscribe to our channel, to check out our memberships, but above all, to check out our Patreon page where you can also become a direct supporter of The Cradle. And we want to thank you so much. You recently helped us reach 40,000 subscribers. Let's keep going. Let's reach 50,000 subscribers here on our YouTube page and above and beyond that. Today, sadly, we have to start with yet another massacre in the Gaza Strip. Another day, another Zionist massacre of Palestinians. Today, the Nasser Medical Complex in Gaza was bombed. At the very least, 15 people were killed, including five more journalists to add to the death toll in Gaza. They include Reuters journalist Hossam al-Masri, Al Jazeera journalist Mohammed Salama, Independent Arabia and AP journalist Mariam Abu Taka, NBC journalist Muat Abu Taha, and journalist Ahmad Abu Aziz, who succumbed later to his wounds. The bombing, just the latest violation of law, of international law, humanitarian law, conventions, etc., by the genocidal army that it's, preparing still to invade Gaza City. Here we can see the journalists who were killed today. Gaza currently the biggest death toll of journalists in modern conflict, according to the Brown University Cost of War project. Since the U.S. Revolutionary War, through most modern conflicts combined, there has not been as many dead journalists as there has been in Gaza alone. Truly, I mean, you're talking about over nearly 250 journalists killed in about 2 years of this genocide. Here we can see the images. These of the double tap attack, right? That's what they call it. They bombed it twice. Nasser Medical Complex. First, they killed all of these people. Then they killed the rescue workers, as you can see here. They do it live on television. The Israeli army has come out and said it was a mistake, right? This is what they always say. It's just a mistake. It's not supposed to happen, yet it keeps happening. As I said, about 250 journalists killed in Gaza alone since the start of the genocide. I feel like the three of us, when it comes to this topic, are a bit depleted. There's really hardly much more than we can say that we have already said, but just to express our complete condemnation or support for the journalists in Gaza and to hope that at some point anything will change.
Yeah, I do feel depleted. Not just because of this. And, you mentioned that some of the journalists worked for Western news agencies. I feel like nothing will happen. Do you know what I mean? I mean, this is an opportunity for Reuters, NBC, et cetera, to AP to, take some action. And they won't. And the thing is, of course, action will be taken, but I suddenly feel like Seema just completely shocked at the rising violence. How can we 2 years after the Israelis started bombing Palestinians still get shocked? There aren't a lot of conflicts. I mean, certainly nothing I've covered that continues to shock this way. And it's really taken a toll on me since yesterday, and over something that's just bizarre. But the demolition of thousands of olive trees, which we can get into in a little bit. I know the international community will act because it's impossible for them not to act. I mean, the temperature is rising on them every day. Even Western governments who have just for decades ignored popular demands in the foreign policy realm from their own populations and demonstrations, like in the Iraq War, million-man marches and stuff. On this one, I can see that they are very concerned because the conditions, their economic conditions, the global political condition is in an entirely different place. They're basically going to get chewed up and spat out. I'm talking about Western European countries. And so they're going to act, but it's almost like they're biding their time until Israel has demolished every structure in Gaza
Yes.
and pushed Palestinians into the tiniest of corners. You know,
Mhm.
I mean, I remember visiting a Syrian refugee camp in uh, Jordan during the Syrian war, and things that we don't normally have to think about, going to the bathroom, right? So they had like one facility for I don't know how many people. So one facility per X number of people, but it was a really large number. And then there was women and men and children, and the stench, the sanitary conditions of something like this. The fact that these things may not flush after being used repeatedly for days and weeks and months. Um, it sort of strips you of feeling like a human. It really does. And I'm not describing this really well. I mean, I felt this way once when we traveled 5 days through Syria, and it was too cold for me to take a shower, and I started to feel like not human. I don't know exactly how to understand to explain this, but I mean, obviously I was fine. And you think of for 2 years, there are, you know, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people who have
Yes.
lived without access to the things that once made them feel human and comfortable, and sane. So yeah, I don't know. I'm definitely hit something this weekend. You'd think it would have been earlier, in these 2 years, but it hasn't been, and it's made me so angry.
Because the thing you brought up before I let you go on, Karim, about the olive trees in the West Bank, it also points to the situation because it's not just Gaza that is undergoing this
No.
crisis, this catastrophe, a Holocaust. Let's call it what it is. It's also the occupied West Bank, where the displacement continues, where the order for new settlements continue to be approved, including the E1 settlement
Mm,
that is going to split up or well give Israel complete control of occupied Jerusalem. They're talking about building tunnels that are going to be the only method for transportation for the Palestinians. As you said, Charmin,
mm.
Western governments or global North governments are simply waiting for Israel to, I guess, get it out of its system. I don't know how else to
No, to
describe it.
finish the job. And then they'll come in and say, oh, we're going to help humanitarian aid and bad Israel. We're not going to send them military equipment or whatever for some time.
For a
It
few
just,
months.
it's galling because all the devastation in Gaza. I mean, obviously aerial bombing, people are looking at basically what looks like parking lots now, that used to be where millions lived. And um, it's not just Israel. Is the Israeli military has bulldozers, like industrial bulldozers and industrial excavators, which they're which are on nonstop to demolish everything in sight, every structure still standing, every tree still standing. And these are largely American companies. I mean, yesterday, like I said, I hit something, and my head just went no, and I called up one of our very reliable writers on Palestine and asked him to look into the who's providing this kind of industrial um, level equipment to demolish Palestinian homes and structures and
Guys,
gardens
I
and
need to
trees.
disconnect for a second. Somebody's knocking on my door. I don't know what's happening. Give me 2 minutes, okay? I didn't mean to cut you off, Charmaine. I'll be back.
Okay, okay. I mean, you saw me today, Kenny. I'm just sort of out of it. Don't like let my energy hit you guys a negative way. I know you're always saying like I'm too optimistic. It's not that I don't see a pathway ahead, and it's just that sometimes, even in recalibrating, analyzing, uh, we're human beings as journalists, right? I mean, you see these incredible, brave Palestinian journalists, you know, day after day, not crying. And then suddenly they'll see one thing, they're on camera and they can't, So we are human. Um, yeah, let me not sort of, drain everyone's energy here. Thank you, Pink Rose, for the $5. Pink Rose says, I was 5 hours without water and was going crazy. Imagine being 2 years without water and food and homes. So sorry, Palestine. Just exactly right. And if
Exactly.
you've ever been, I'm camping, okay? I just want to like throw this out there for anyone who's been camping and maybe not enjoyed it fantastically, because some of the things we're used to, I mean, we can all rough it, right? But there's just some things that make it very hard. And everyone's different. For me, 5 days without a shower in ice cold Syria during the winter, it was in December, was, when I started to not feel human. Um, for others, it'll be something different, Uh,
I
but
think
oh,
that
you're
the
back.
list by this point, like the checklist of how do you make an entire population feel like not humans, has been, completed and completed again and again in Gaza. Honestly, all of these 2 million people, all we can do is apologize
You know,
for what is happening.
let's, before we get into the politics, since
Mm.
I'm on sort of morose funk, why don't we just dive into the olive tree thing? Because I don't know why. I mean, it's what triggers us, something, a tree. Why would a tree trigger me after I've seen, kids without limbs? Um, the Israeli army, this is in the West Bank, okay? And we're seeing here at the cradle, and I'm sure those paying attention, the West Bank is not getting a lot of headlines at all anywhere. But emboldened by the global silence, or at least from capitals, right, from governments, which is all Israel seems to care about. Emboldened by that silence, they have started to do things that they wouldn't dare to have done in the West Bank. I mean, demolishing entire villages. Okay, and so on Thursday, so just this last week, for 3 days, the Israeli army uprooted thousands, thousands of olive trees in the West Bank village of Al Mughayr. Okay, this is just northeast of Ramallah, the West Bank capital. And they did it as part of collective punishment campaign against Palestinian residents. All right, and this is reported by Israeli media. Um, Collective punishment is illegal. It's illegal. And they took it out on trees. So they didn't just go after trees. It was important that they go after trees because usually the Israelis like to kill Palestinians. It was important to go after trees. It was strategic because they want to clear out land to build settlements, okay, to free it up for their military bases, for things like that. I mean, the West Bank. I can tell you, there's a map in somewhere in the Israeli security, national sort of government, that shows exactly the design for Judea and Samaria once every Palestinian is gone. Okay. And so I'm sure that was targeted areas. But, around almost 50% of Palestinian lands were, um, of Palestinian agricultural land was used to plant olive trees. And this is before the Zionist project came. So imagine the 45% of agricultural land in Palestine is now down to I don't know how many dunams worth of olive trees. But olive farming has for centuries been the backbone of Palestinian agriculture. There's not an Arab, in this region who doesn't know Palestinian olive oil. When I'm in London, I now only buy Palestinian olive oil, and it's fantastic. If you haven't bought it, you can get it off of Amazon. I mean, it's really good stuff. These are, the trees, olive trees last for um, hundreds of years, 300 to 600 years, some even longer. And they're deeply connected because they're so much a part of the Palestinian agriculture. They are deeply connected to the Palestinian identity and their historical connection to the land. So when the Zionists, the foreign Jews, Jewish settlers came in, they they basically, they talked about, we all know the story, we, if it wasn't for us, there was a swamp there, we made the desert bloom, right? How did they make the desert bloom when they destroyed so many olive trees? Well, they brought in pine trees from the West, from an environment they know, okay? They wanted recognizable vegetation. It just goes to show that these settlers, these Jewish settlers, had no historic connection to this land. They couldn't even thrive without looking out their windows and looking at pine trees, and the coniferous trees that are not native to the Levant. In fact, the fires that blew through Israel this year, remember those absolutely out of control fires, a lot of them were exacerbated by these foreign pine trees that, will flare up in this heat and dry climate, right? And so kind of serves them right. But here they are getting rid of these by the way, the reforestation with the Western kind of trees was a key function of the Jewish National Fund, which was set up in
Yes.
1901 to lay the foundations of Israel. This is all like super planned. There's nothing spontaneous about this. And now they're burning, and there's a picture, I don't know if you can put it up, that we have on our story on this, of a Palestinian woman just clinging to the remnants of her olive tree. It means everything for these people. It really, I mean, I feel like, burn down their home, dispossess them of their land, but cut down an olive tree. It goes to their soul. And thousands of trees in this village, just like that. It's
No,
really a village wiped out.
no indigenous person, not native of the land, will ever destroy the fruit of the land, and much less
Correct.
replace it with something that is the colonizer. That is a colonizer mentality. Karim,
Correct.
give us your thoughts. Give us your thoughts on this before we move on to the other news that broke this weekend.
Yeah, it's exactly what Sharmin said. They want to destroy the history, the culture, and everything because oil and olive oil and olive trees are very important for the Palestinian and for the region also, not only in Palestine, in Syria, and in Lebanon. And we know they didn't only do it in Palestine. The Americans and the Israelis destroyed many things for the culture and history of this region. We know Tadmor or Palmyra in Syria, they destroyed it. In the recent war, Israel bombed many places around the Baalbek. And of course, the Israelis since 1948, and they are systematically destroying the vegetation in Palestine. And as Sharmin said, they are placing them with other trees, and especially these trees come from Europe, and that's why we see all the fires and everything that is يعني even the Al-Aqsa Mosque, the Israelis want the people to be convinced that there was no mosque. This is the temple, and it's a Jewish temple, although there is no historical evidence for this. And since years, there's many fake Israeli historians and scientists. They try and that try to fake historical tablets or historical monuments and claim they are from Jerusalem. And apparently they were not. There's many videos and reports about that. So destroying olive tree is nothing for the Israelis. It's so easy. And we also, I put a video while Sharmin was speaking. The video shows an Israeli soldier putting happy music while she is destroying the olive trees. So it's as Sharmin said, usually she's the pessimistic, and uh,
You're the pessimistic.
I am the pessimistic. So it is really depressing. Yani, they started with the people, and now with the plants, and later on, God knows who with what.
And I mean, by the way, so you know, the terrorist troops were in there from Thursday in the village of Mughayir. They were there from Thursday to Sunday, and they'd established a curfew and used that time to just demolish all the vegetation, Um, but when they left on Sunday, Palestinian residents immediately ran and tried to salvage trees and replant ones that could be. But there's like all kinds of imagery here, like they're uprooting Palestine. I mean, they just, they're excavating. They're not just cutting down these trees, they're pulling them out at their roots. And this is so painful. Like, I'm so pissed off. I don't know why. I just don't know why this is, create a reaction like this. But, I hope nobody gets tired when they get there. Okay, maybe you need a few days to take a few breaths, but this is not something we're going to let go. Nobody's
Not at
going to
all.
let go. The Western world will be a stump at the end of this for what they've allowed to happen. A Holocaust. I mean, what a joke. Jews who talk about the Holocaust today. I mean, I feel sorry for the majority of Jews because they've been so propagandized. They've been so completely brainwashed into thinking that they're still victims so that they don't see what their Jewish organizations, the ones that are basically Zionist, right? Because I remember I had a professor at Columbia University who was head of a major American Jewish organization. He was a rabbi in training too, and I actually studied the history of Zionism with him. Rabbi Arthur Hertzberg. Oh yeah, and he was not. I mean, he was not of the variety that came after. He was quite elderly when I studied with him, and he is not the kind of Jewish American leader that came after him. They were fanatics, basically, and have instilled in so many, at least American Jews, this idea that they've got to do everything to survive, that the whole world's against them. And in fact, we see so many Jews opening their eyes now and saying, hang on a second, I was sold a bridge ever since I was small, in Jewish community school, on our sort of weekend trips and our Jewish community activities, etc. And they're backtracking on this. And it is young Jewish Americans and young Jewish Westerners who are thinking this way. But I mean, really, I just don't know what's going to happen at the end of this. I mean, nobody can say Holocaust again, with a straight face and talk about something that happened 80 years ago when we're watching this.
100%.
And to this
There's
day,
there's
go
a
ahead.
comment for you, Sharmeen, if you want to read it.
What does it say?
It's from Portography. You see it?
No, because my
Board of
computer's
Graphics
funny.
says, Miss Narwani, I hope a little donation will cheer you up. You are my heroine. Love, admiration, and mostly respect. From Bahia, Brazil. Muito obrigado, Portography. Thank you so much.
Thank you, obrigado. Seriously, thank you very much. Don't worry, I'll be back at the next podcast on fire.
No, we must, it's gonna happen, and I feel like it's the same feeling across, anyone who cares about human lives, everybody who doesn't, the U.S. government, the Israeli government, etc. Another big thing happened over the weekend. I apologize for the sound. I don't know if you guys can hear it. They keep doing tests here. The alarm. The Israeli Air Force yesterday bombed Sana'a in Yemen, very,
Mhm.
very harsh, very hardly, very hard. I think they hit it 30 times. I don't know. You'll correct me, Karim. And this comes as Israeli media was talking about the Israeli military now preparing a target bank for Yemen to try to, dismantle the Yemeni armed forces led by Ansar Allah. Um a very intense destruction. In particular, there's an image of this bombing. It's You don't even know what exactly they are using, the Israelis, anymore. Just over the weekend they were against using white phosphorus in Gaza, other chemical weapons. Now this in Sana'a, they bombed the presidential palace. They bombed other sites. Karim, what do you think is next? What do you think is next for Yemen, and in particular, what do you make of this attack over the weekend?
Yeah, like first, this came in response for the Yemeni attack over Tel Aviv. Yemen used a new missile. It had a cluster ammunition, which means that when it reaches above Tel Aviv or above a certain area above Israel or in the Israeli skies, the warhead explodes and there's cluster
The
ammunition.
cluster munition.
Yes, that spreads. This is the first time they use it, and this is the first time such a missile arrives over Israel. Later on, Israel said they responded to this attack, and they bombed, of course, civilian infrastructure that supports electricity and fuel for the Yemenis. Uh, this, of course, will not prevent the Yemenis to escalate against Israel. And they didn't hit anything military. What they are doing is that they are making some people in Sana'a suffer the lack of electricity. And the Yemenis or Ansarullah, in an official statement, said that we were prepared and we have other facilities for the electricity. And the attack on Sana'a led to the death of 4 people and around 60 injuries. And the Yemenis also said that they will send more and more missiles. And prior to the missile, Sana'a also sent multiple drones in the same day. And one drone reached, and the Israeli army said that they detonated these drones, but there's videos from inside Israel that shows the drones are hovering above various areas. I think the Yemenis will escalate also. Till now, they are only sending a missile at once. I think they should, or they will start, according to their recent statements, they will start to send more than one missile, which will be very difficult for Israel also to intercept, because till now we are seeing that the missiles are reaching and they are entering the space of Israel. Previously, I think for the last 1 month, the Israeli army was saying that they intercepted Yemeni projectiles outside the border. Till now, we don't know if over Jordan or over Saudi Arabia where they are intercepting them, but they were intercepting them. Recently, they are reaching the location. And of course, Hamas also did a statement and urged the Muslim countries and entities to follow what Sana'a is doing, because currently only Sana'a is supporting the Palestinian resistance and inflicting damages to Israel. Because even if the missile didn't reach, we know every siren forces many Israelis, up to 1 million, according to the Hebrew media, to go into shelters, and many people. I don't know if it's funny. Most of the people injured are while they are running to shelters, and
They trip themselves up very much. Yes.
yeah, and let us not forget that tons of airlines still don't fly to Ben Gurion Airport, which is in the capital Tel Aviv, or
The Red Sea, Eilat port.
yeah, and Eilat port also, but usually they don't say it's the capital, but it is for somehow the capital of Israel. And many of them, of course, they are Western airlines. And also, I didn't mention Eilat because Eilat is due to the operation in the sea. That's why Eilat is closed. And Ben Gurion is not fully operational because of the Yemeni missiles.
Indeed.
We'll see what will happen in the future. If Yemen was able to send 2 missiles every day, this will be really damaging for the Israelis.
I want to
Tel
read
Aviv
something
is
very
the
quickly from the report of Walla about this, about the target bank, because they say that there was already a failed attempt to assassinate Mohammed Abed Al Karim Al Rahmari, who is the Yemeni Armed Forces chief of staff, and that according to Israeli intelligence, they cannot gather, or they haven't been able to really do much damage to to Sanaa's capabilities, because most of their infrastructure is underground and they don't really have the intelligence. I guess the Saudi-led coalition was not very good at gathering the intelligence during their war. Now Israel's trying to fill in that gap.
We actually had an article not long ago by Mawada Iskander, who's just like the most amazing female geopolitical analyst. I absolutely love this woman. And she wrote about the infiltration, like the Israelis and the Americans just don't have eyes and ears in Yemen the way they need to. I mean, certainly not in Sana'a and areas that support, Yemeni resistance areas. And so they're using all kinds of ways to now try to infiltrate, communications, etc. Look up that article because you won't see this anywhere else in English. You just won't. That's the kind of work we commission here at the Cradle, the stuff you haven't heard about. But also, speaking of stuff I hadn't heard about today, Russian media reported that the Israeli army and they report this quoting Al Shifa Medical Complex in Gaza. The Israeli army is using unknown gases during its attacks, and hospitals are receiving patients with symptoms of asphyxiation daily now. Um, Nothing surprises, and just the idea of Israel gassing people is just beyond me. And there's reports that they're putting stuff in the water in the Levant from Palestine to Lebanon to Syria. I mean, these are things we're trying to follow up, with at the cradle, because it's kind of insane. It's insane. It's just, this is stuff you read about, and now you can get that information. Sometimes you can even see the information, and yet nothing's going on. I mean, I have to say, September is coming up, right? And that is the annual plenary session at the UN General Assembly. And if um, that theater doesn't explode with,
Condemnation.
just condemnation and hostility toward Israel, if the Israeli ambassador is not forced to crawl out of that room. I mean, is Netanyahu coming to the plenary sessions?
Yes. Yes,
Okay,
yes.
and well, then he'll meet his Al Qaeda counterpart, because
His buddy.
the Al Qaeda president of Syria is going to be there too.
To give a speech.
He's not afraid to go to the United States, but he's afraid to go to Iraq, where he's wanted for killing Iraqi people. What, it's
The
kind of gone
upside down
crazy,
world. The upside down
right?
world. I want to thank very
Yeah.
briefly before we continue with this to Yorkshire Sam. He says, how do we force a change in policy towards Israel when the US administration is full of white supremacists and when there are far more Christian Zionists now than the young Jews who reject Zionism? I wish I had the answer to that. But yes, in September, you're going to see Ahmad al-Shara, the newly, the diversity loving president of Syria. He just loves that diversity so much.
No,
He's
but
going.
now he's banned. He's now said that the Kurdish region and the Druze region can't vote in the parliamentary
Oh, yeah.
elections in Syria.
Due to security reasons. I mean,
Yeah.
who is the threat to security inside
No,
Syria currently?
he said due to security situations, that might endanger them in their regions. But Bashar al-Assad made sure elections were held wherever could be reached, wherever Syrians could vote, even in the middle of a, NATO war against Syria. So, as did Abraham Lincoln, insist on holding elections, because what is the meaning of democracy if conflict stops you from exercising your right to vote? And he will not let the minority regions in Syria vote in the parliamentary elections. By the way, according to Ahmed al-Shara's HTS government, he gets to appoint himself, I think it's 30% or 70 seats in the parliament, some number like that. But he gets to himself appoint. That is as undemocratic as things can be. I mean, I'm sure Syrians now are starting to wish Assad was still in Damascus.
It reminds you of of Ukraine, right? Ukraine is another war inflicted country where the elections were canceled, in which his president has kind of just declared himself supreme leader. Expect the same from Ahmad al-Shara. I can't wrap my head around this, honestly. Like the founder of Al-Qaeda in Syria, deputy commander to the founder of ISIS, is going to give a speech at the UN General Assembly in just in just a few weeks. And I think it's very interesting that you say that, Charmin, that he's wanted in Iraq. I think that's a very good thing to always keep in mind, that like this man cannot even visit his neighboring country because he'll end up being arrested. And just briefly, I want to mention, I know you guys
Well, he
discussed
didn't go to the Arab League meeting there because he was worried about maybe someone taking revenge.
Indeed. Indeed.
Yeah.
I wanted to mention that this weekend there were reports that the withdrawal of U.S. troops from Iraq have started. I know this is something you guys already discussed a bit. I just want to bring it back up because I have this brings a question to my mind, because I really didn't feel like the withdrawal of U.S. troops from Iraq was going to happen. It seems that to be currently going underway, they're living in Al Assad base and I think Victoria base, which is inside Baghdad International Airport. Is this setting the way for the restart of the Israeli war against Iran? Is the United States currently just removing the targets that the Iraqi militias or Iran itself would target if during a new there are renewal of what do you call it hostilities?
Yeah, so we're obviously we've talked over the past few weeks about how um, the Iraqi government is under great pressure to have the popular mobilization units, the PMUs, disarmed. That's the resistance forces that fought off ISIS in the country, to have them disarmed or to sort of bring them under the Iraqi army's umbrella. And then equally, the same pressure is being applied on the Lebanese government to disarm the Lebanese resistance and sort of merge weapons or make sure all weapons are in the hands of the state. These are initiatives. The pressure is brought to bear by the Americans, who obviously act in Israel's interest. What's really notable, though, is how much, the Israelis. So Netanyahu just gave a speech in which he praises the government of Lebanon under Joseph Aoun, president, and Prime Minister Nawaf Salam. Netanyahu is praising them, and the recent decision by Lebanon's cabinet to work towards disarming Hezbollah by the end of 2025. Okay. And he says this decision represents an opportunity for Lebanon to restore its sovereignty and rebuild state institutions, the army, and governance without interference or influence from non-state actors. In light of the significant development, Israel is prepared, he says, to support Lebanon in its efforts to disarm Hezbollah and to work toward a safer and more stable future for both countries. And he says, if they do disarm Hezbollah, Israel will take reciprocal steps, including, all right, this is Mr. Loophole. It's Benjamin Loophole Netanyahu is his name, okay? Including a gradual reduction of Israeli force presence in coordination with the United States. I mean, that was like a non-statement. Nothing was said there, just FYI. And he encourages, says this is the time for Israel and Lebanon to move forward and cooperate, disarm Hezbollah, and enhance stability and prosperity in both countries. What a joke. What a colossal joke. How embarrassing for the government of Nawaf Salam and Joseph Aoun. Seriously. And it just goes to show, like, basically, if you disarm, it's something like Libya learned, right? It's something that Iraq learned. If you disarm, they will tear you limb from limb. You cannot disarm ever. You have to North Korea it, okay, till the end of your days. That's the only way. And as a result, the PMUs in Iraq will not disarm. The Palestinian political organizations in the camps here will not disarm. Iran will never disarm. Forget disarming. They will never, ever shut down their indigenous nuclear energy program. Nobody should ever disarm, because what comes next is an Israeli or American promise to bring you security. And you know what that means.
You know what that means. How many more examples do they need? Karim, give
Yeah,
us
I
your
wanted
thoughts
to
about
comment
this.
on a couple
Yes.
of things. First, regarding the American withdrawal from Iraq. Just I want to remind people that the first time they wanted to withdraw, they took that decision in 2007, and they started to withdraw in 2009, and they said they completed their withdrawal in 2011, which is the same year where the Arab Spring began. And then ISIS started to make massacres in Iraq, and then they returned to defeat ISIS in 2014. So Americans withdrawing from the region might not be a good thing. although eventually we all need it, but maybe they have like an agenda with the Israelis, and countries and leaders should be aware of this. That's one. And second, I feel ashamed as a Lebanese that Netanyahu is thanking my president, who I didn't elect, and my prime minister that came out of the blue. He's like Casper. We saw him 1 month prior in the TV, in the ICJ, and then people said he's Lebanese, and then we started to read about him, and the following week or 2 weeks, he became the prime minister of Lebanon. And even we are so ashamed, even the people that were fighting with Israel in the civil war, which is the Kataib party. Yesterday, the head of the party, or one of the main figures in the party, he said how Lebanon handed over an Israeli prisoner without any return, and he said this is a disgrace. So I don't know what the new president and prime minister is doing, but everybody is ashamed. And we gave an Israeli prisoner for nothing. And today I woke up and reading that Netanyahu thanked the president. And he said their names. He didn't like
Nawaf
say
Salam.
we will help Lebanon. And there's something very dangerous.
like he's friendly with Joe and Nawaf, right? That's kind of what the tone was. He
Yeah, and
probably is.
If it
Yeah, and
walks like a
there's
dog and it quacks like a duck.
yeah, and there's a big misconception in Lebanon. They are making that this guy uh, released a warrant against Netanyahu, which is wrong. It's the other court that ordered this, not the court of Nawaf Salam. I just wanted to clarify this, and I want to say there's something very dangerous in the speech of Netanyahu, where he said we will aid the Lebanese army or Lebanon when they want to disarm Hezbollah. What does that mean? Will they bomb some locations of Hezbollah if the army was unable to remove the weapons, which we know they will not do it?
I mean, it's. I think I cannot add anything to what you just said, Karim. Like, it's just shameful, and it shows exactly who they're working for, right? Salam and Aoun, two leaders imposed on Lebanon under threat of war, under threat of complete destruction, and who are, now, well, doing their job. We
Yeah,
can't
and
fault them
also
for that.
I
They are
just
doing their
want,
job.
yeah. Nawaf Salam was imposed, but the president was not, because Hezbollah elected him. But Nawaf Salam came out of the blue, literally.
So basically, the other side are all liars, from the Americans to the Israelis to Joseph Aoun, okay? Because, and Hezbollah got very upset. They trusted in their former army commander to do right by them and to have a compromised prime minister. And oftentimes Hezbollah has compromised on these key roles and fallen on their faces afterwards. But still, honestly, like idiots, they just keep trusting. At some point you're so naive, just get out of the political game. And this is what I fear. I fear this with Hizb today. I think Iran has, maybe the veil is dropped for them. The sort of naivete of endless strategic patience, whatever, is gone. There was a debate last podcast about, was it last well, anyways, very recently on our podcast about, would Iran do a preemptive strike? And I was like, nah, I don't think they've ever done anything like that in their history. But man, if they did, that would be great. I think the image of Iran pounding Israel with impunity, and I say that because actually nobody condemned them. Do you know what I mean? While that was going on, nobody condemned them because they acted within law. They acted fully in self-defense. After terrorist acts were launched by Israel, murdering Iranian officials, trying to murder the supreme leader, it just, and the president of the country and the head of the military and intelligence, and, all the way down the rack. So nobody actually criticized Iran. And if Iran did a preemptive strike, before anyone could criticize Iran, I think the global population will be cheering it on and marching for Iran because nobody else is doing anything. I don't know. I think it's a great PR move for Tehran to launch a preemptive war on Israel, to be honest. Were you going to say something more? Because I want to highlight our feature today. It's quite
I
interesting.
only wanted to say when you're talking about Hezbollah should do something. Just today they announced that they will arrange a protest in downtown Beirut, and I know many people were excited, and some people canceled their stuff to go there, and now suddenly they said that they canceled the protest. They said that we don't want people to protest, although they had an official announcement about it. So
Well,
I
I
don't
think the
know.
Lebanese resistance has to be very, very cautious because the other side are absolute bastards. Yeah. So they have to be very, very cautious that there won't be shooting to blame resistance people as
False
well. Do you know,
flags.
false flags? Yeah, exactly. So if they got a sniff of that, or maybe they were given something in return for canceling this, because I think the Aoun Salam duo up there, they sort of have taken us into this bubble of thinking that, I mean, their supporters certainly seem to think, oh, the era of the resistance is over. They really seem to believe this now.
They totally
Um,
do.
but people like Aoun are not, he's not dumb. Nawaf Salam, yes, he's absolutely like, he just stepped foot in Lebanon for the first time in I don't know how long, do you know? But Joseph Aoun, he knows the army will not take sides, or it will die trying. But he knows that if in fact that this could kick off a civil war, and none of these guys actually want a civil war. But a lot of them are under the illusion that they've won something, and I just, this is the danger. Fools who live in their bubbles then kicking off something even more dangerous than the terrorist neighbor to Lebanon south, to kick off civil strife, which would please the Israelis no end and be
Right.
self-defeating for Lebanon.
Indeed. Um, I want to pivot a bit, but not so much because it's still within the same topic. And it is, what are we witnessing today? Well, we're still witnessing the war on terror, right? Like everything that has happened over the past several years, including the genocide on Gaza and the fall of Syria and etc., has been or initiated thanks to the infamous war on terror and the 2001 AUMF that allows the president of the United States to invade sovereign countries without the approval of Congress. That has been
Mm.
repeated once and again and again. And now we're seeing it happen beyond West Asia. Now it seems war is coming to Latin America. And I just want to mention this briefly, because I know this is not usually our topics of discussion of our interest, but I just feel we need to talk about it. We need to talk about what's happening in the Caribbean. We need to talk about the submarines, the nuclear submarines, the thousands of marines that are being deployed by Donald Trump. At the same
Mm.
time that he's militarizing the streets of Washington D.C. right now, apparently you have
Mm.
army people in D.C. like in every corner. He's militarizing this, and he's calling the government of Venezuela, the elected government of Venezuela, a drug cartel. They're saying the White House all of a sudden is saying Venezuela doesn't have a government; they have a drug cartel, and they call it the cartel of the Suns or cartel de los Soles. And just a few months ago, the Donald Trump gave an order that allows the military to strike terrorist targets in Latin America, right? So they declare all of these drug cartels terrorist, and they use the same mentality of the war on
Mm.
terror to launch more war now in their backyard, right? And I just want to mention this. They say that the government of Venezuela is a drug cartel, the same administration, the same government, that installed a narco state in Afghanistan, right? For 20 years, the CIA ran roughshod, ran like this heroin bonanza in Afghanistan that flooded the streets of Europe and of the United States with opioids that were coming from the government, under the umbrella of this democratic government in Afghanistan of Ashraf Ghani, of Hamid Karzai. That was
Mm.
a narco state with the support of the U.S. Government fully, and via a cartel that is now, it has been making the news recently, the Fort Bragg cartel, right? Fort Bragg, the largest military base in the United States, where all of the special forces are trained. You're talking Delta Force, Navy Team, SEAL 6, what's the other one? The Green Berets, etc. Now there's this book out called The Fort Bragg Cartel that talks about how the special forces are essentially have been running a narco, organization out of Fort Bragg, with support of Mexican drug cartels, including the Los Zetas, which at one point were Mexican special forces trained by Israeli instructors to fight the drug against wars in Mexico. Eventually, of course, became a drug cartel. It's laughable what they're doing in the Caribbean if it weren't so terrifying. You're right, because what they're trying to do is bring exactly what they did to West Asia, to Libya, to Syria, to Iraq. What they're trying to do to
Chaos, the
Lebanon.
breakdown of governance, the collapse of economies, so that they can control. Because I've always said when empires starts to shrink and disintegrate, its only sort of way to still stay on top is to have others weaken even more than it. And here's the thing, like, I haven't sort of looked at Latin America in any great depth since I was sort of in university days. It was actually the first area of politics I was interested in. But when the cradle started, the year the cradle started, was it 2021 that the U.S. got out of Afghanistan?
Yes.
So I remember an article that I'd commissioned that went absolutely viral. And it wasn't in 2020, it was after that. Okay. So the Taliban had been back in for a while. And
It was in
one of the
21 when
first,
they eradicated the poppy plantations.
yeah,
That
one
was
of the first
2023, I think.
acts they did
Mm.
was to eradicate all the poppy fields that the Americans had reigned over for 20 years. At the same time, advancing a narrative that, it's these Talibans and these, like, rogue actors that are pumping opiates and other drugs across our borders, onto our innocent youth, when in fact the article demonstrated that before the Americans had come in and the Taliban was in charge, poppy had been eradicated. After the Americans left, one of the first things that changed Afghanistan, poppy was eradicated. That it was the American occupation, invasion and occupation of Afghanistan that actually spawned the drug industry, the massive drugs that were coming out. And by the way, the money, the profits gained from the sale and transfer of these drugs were laundered through Western financial systems by
IHSBC.
basically the American allies in this theater. This is how they, they launder. Oh God, they're so disgusting. I don't understand. Why are we so nice? Why aren't they getting like a fist in the face like every single day? It just takes the one to make people realize, oh, they're not invincible. And they've created this psychology of they can kill us, but we can't even retaliate because we're terrorists then, right? They've created this psychology. So even if they're shooting you, you just cower. And that's got to change. And again, it's only Yemen that's going at it, right?
Yeah,
The reason the Americans ran from the Yemeni theater is because the Yemens just come at them as they should. They should come against the people attacking them and destroying their economy. They should go for them. They should kill them. They should eradicate them. And they do. And then what happens when they come when the Americans, they just sit in Syria in a big resistance axis country, they sit in Lebanon, another resistance axis country, they surround Iran's borders, through through Azerbaijan, through Turkey, through supposed Iranian friends. And what does Iran do? I mean, this is the thing. I'm sorry. How long are you going to be the idiot? It is high time that the enemy takes a punch straight to the face, and then they'll think twice.
Exactly. And just to highlight one last thing about what's happening in the Caribbean, most of the drugs that leave South America, they leave through Ecuador, they leave through the Pacific, they leave through to Colombia. Colombia that has 7 US military bases and has been under occupation for decades. And Venezuela is actually eradicating its drug plantations, but they send the submarines there, right? They send the submarines to those who are their enemies, not to the ones that are actually exporting drugs, not to the actual narco states. Like I remember just a few years ago, the former president of Honduras, Juan Orlando Hernandez, who was placed there after the coup, a U.S. imposed coup, and a U.S. imposed president, he's now in jail in Brooklyn, somewhere in Brooklyn, for drug trafficking. What? Who was it that said it about Manuel Noriega in Panama? He said he's a son of a bitch, but he's our son of a bitch. Like that
Yeah.
applies to Julani. That applies to like across the
Yeah,
board, truly.
it's not only in military, Sharmin, also in economy. And for instance, the Caesar Act is the act that يعني
Crippled
I
Syria's
think crippled
economy.
Syria. It's not only the war. It's this act, and this act was implemented in 2019, and it was signed by Trump. And then when Trump came, he lifted the same act that made this to Syria and made people suffer and brought famine and many things to Syria. And then when he lifted the act, everybody celebrated in Syria and they raised his picture. So the mentality and the propaganda of the United States is so huge. It's not only about they implement this mentality. You can't kill an American. You can't even accuse American of their acts. This is crazy. I mean that the way that I think and the rest of the people think yeah, it's so huge that I can't even comprehend it.
Thankfully, we have spaces like this in which you are, doing the work to bridge the gap. And I feel like a situation like the Holocaust in Gaza has really dropped the veil and has allowed people to ask the questions that they felt before they couldn't ask.
So just, again, another aside is just bring you folks' attention to our feature today, which is a bit off the beaten path. It is about Taiwan signing a maritime security agreement with Somaliland, which is a breakaway nation from Somalia that is not recognized by a single country in the world. Okay. Except for the fact, and it comes to our attention because Donald Trump, after he was elected president, before he got into the White House, suddenly made an announcement that he's looking to recognize Somaliland. And why is that? Because Somaliland lies right across the water from Yemen. Okay. Major maritime corridors for transportation of not just energy resources, but weapons, security stuff. And Taiwan, Taiwan has signed a security agreement with Somaliland. Taiwan. So this is basically what Taiwan. How many thousands of miles is it away? Like 5,000?
4,700.
Yeah, 4,700 miles away from Somaliland, an unrecognized nation wannabe. Taiwan goes there and strikes the maritime security deal. And this is an American provocation against China because China has its first ever military base, overseas military base. Okay,
In
the one
Djibouti.
in Djibouti, right? Again, also in the Horn of Africa. The reason being that those corridors are so essential to their trade, and China's larger project of its Belt and Road Initiative, which connects land routes to railways to shipping routes, what China calls its string of pearls, ports along these major maritime routes. And so the US wants to disrupt it. And what does it do? It brings in Taiwan, okay, puts aside its one China policy and the whole world's one China policy. And Somalia's one Somalia policy, and just prances in there to provoke. If China doesn't think the US is coming for it full force, and if Iran thinks it's deterred the American beast, these two countries need to think again. And if Russia thinks even a Ukraine deal will stop the United States coming for Russia, wrong. I mean, it's what is it called? Where only one side can win. This is the kind of battle.
Existential, no?
Well, yeah, but I mean, I'm saying it's the kind of battle the Americans are launching and their allies are launching against the multipolar world. They feel that they will perish if they don't destroy multipolarism. So they're going to do everything to destroy. At this point,
Did you see?
I-
I mean, you must have seen the news also of like the Mexican drug cartels who are training in Ukraine in the use of drones. They are
okay, we
really,
actually
really making sure like the whole thing connects.
We actually just did a piece, I think it was last week, on the UAE being, creating the national blueprint on how to spend decades recruiting and raising mercenary armies to go into theaters from Libya to Yemen, to, is it Sudan, to Gaza, UAE mercenaries. So a lot of them are Colombian, a lot from Latin America and other countries as well. But the UAE really kicked this off when they invited, Blackwater's Eric Prince in, who lives in the Emirates. Okay, basically mercenaries for hire, and
Yes.
and this kind of thing is because, I mean, this is an immediate security threat to the world. You know,
Eric Prince, who's now spending his time in the Haitian capital, also deploying drones, also
we
showing off
mentioned
how
this
to
in the
use drones.
article that actually the blueprint he created of raising mercenary armies and deploying them in the Emirates is what he's now taking to Haiti.
The business of war. What a lucrative business. I think we can wrap this episode for this week. We have covered so many topics. I want to thank everyone who joined us. Before we leave, I want to thank Lav66, who gave a £5 donation. They say, I feel that the resistance should go after leaderships in the empire, as the empire has been doing to the leadership of the resistance. One could only hope. But yes, again, I want to thank everyone who joined us this week. To remind you to leave a like before you leave today, to subscribe to our channel, to check out our Patreon, as well as our memberships here on the YouTube. And we will see you on Thursday, same time, same channel.
Become a Patreon.
Become a patron.
Or else.
Or not